Good evening, everybody. I'm Peter Coleman. I'm Head of Design and Heritage at the Guildford Society. And I'm going to try and chair a question and answer session from the audience. So I'd just like to explain the protocol for the questions and answers. Could you raise your hand if you have a question to our two speakers? And somebody will come along with a roving mic. Could you then say your name and then make your question? So the first hand up is to a lady there. Just while the mic is going there, could I just say that Justin has outlined the challenges that the nation faces in terms of addressing energy usage and the responsibility that we all have to try and address. And then each of them has tried to illustrate through their own experience of passive house design. So there's a wealth of information that I would hope you would give us some questions. So lady over there.
Hi, I'm Cecilia, and thank you. That was also interesting and inspiring. I had a quick question. I was interested in the house that was retrofitted, so the 17th century one that's listed. What happened about the windows? Because that's always a big issue, isn't it, with
it
buildings?
is.
So, did you get permission to change them from single glazed?
Well, there are some 1960s, so actually they were replaced in the 80s or 90s, but not very beautiful. And we got some historic photographs, and we saw they had originally, about 1910, I think it was, they had Yorkshire sash windows, which are horizontal sliding sash windows, and those are really those are all over Saffron Walden. So we thought, well, we've got to do that, and the building hasn't quite started on site, I should say. But I tried first. I found a company up in Yorkshire that make these windows, and I said, look, I'd like to work with you to make a passive house version of the window. And he kept saying, oh, they're really good, and I do air tests and so on, and they're good. But I said, look, please trust me. I know they won't be quite good enough. I've got this really good designer who can work with you. And he's anyway. We've ended up. They wouldn't do it. They thought the windows were good enough, and we've gone to a company that we've used before for vertical sashes. They're actually a tilt and turn sash. So when they're closed, they look exactly like a normal sash window. And they're in Austria again, and they're producing a horizontal Yorkshire replica sliding sash window.
But sort of triple glazed or whatever?
It'll be triple glazed, yeah. Yes. Okay. But, what's his name? Kaminsky, conservation officer in Islington. When we wanted to put triple glazing in an 18th century building in Exmouth Market, and they wouldn't allow us that. It allowed us double glazed and allowed us triple glazed in the new, which looked exactly the same. And actually had to get that, to even get the double glazed, I had to take the sample along. And he said, so are you using putty on the windows? No one uses putty nowadays. It's all silicone in place, but we'll paint it to look like putty. We'll paint it. And it just had to go through this real fast to just, pretend we were mocking it up. But anyway, he came along and said he was really impressed. And I said, now tell me which are the triple glazed and which are the double, and they couldn't. Right,
oh wow, that's good. Yeah. Point proven in a sense, yeah. Excellent, thank you. That's very interesting. Okay.
Other questions?
All right, thanks. Yeah.
Lady over there.
Hi, I'm Beth. I live in Sutton Green that has no phase 3 electrics, no gas. And if I wanted to build a passive house there, I'd find it almost impossible to do it. Unless I paid a fortune to have the phase 3 electrics brought in.
No? It doesn't need to be three-phase.
Well, I've been told it does to have ground source heat pumps.
Not. It depends on the size. I mean, if it's a big ground source heat pump, then you.
Yeah, not for a passive house. You'd likely need three-phase if it was a large leaky house. For sure, you might need three-phase, but not for a passive house. So it's the key thing about always reducing your energy consumption first. It's the primary thing to do.
We've only put there's only one of our projects has had three-phase, and all the rest, including a massive community centre, all single-phase with heat pumps.
So to retrofit an old Victorian house, where would you even start?
Well, I would have, if I had more time, I would have put up some slides on those because we've done a few. And I would start with, my favourite would be wood fibre insulation internally with clay plaster. And a few years ago, people were saying, well, you can't do more than 100 millimetres. But actually now, without risk of interstitial condensation. But now if you do, the dynamic modelling has been done and proven that actually it gets a little bit more difficult at 100, but actually when you get up to 200 millimetres thickness, then, which is really useful, really good insulation, then you lose the risk of interstitial condensation. But you need to have on the outside face, you need to put this it's a completely natural cream that is used in historic buildings in Germany. So it's not like the old silicone or anything. It's completely vapor permeable and absorbent and permanent. And it just creates a kind of a Gore-Tex effect on the outer skin of either stone or brick.
So you do the outside as opposed to the inside?
No, we do the insulation on the inside, but then sorry, I'm not explaining myself. We need to make sure that the wall doesn't get saturated, because a Victorian house was really designed to be heated by lots of coal that's driving out all the rain that's soaking into the brickwork. As fast as the rain soaks into the brickwork, all that masses of heat is drying it out. So we can't just put insulation on, which would slow down that vapour drive. We need to at the same time make sure that the water isn't soaking up in the walls. And that's why I just say this cream. It's just a little subtle thing.
But the cost of doing that sort of thing is enormous. So all the cornice, architraves, doors, skirtings, everything has to come off to start again. So if the government aren't going to help people with grants, how's anybody going to be able to afford to do it?
Totally. I mean, well, there's so many questions in that.
Right,
but firstly, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, if it's a terraced house, then you only need to do the front and the back wall, because the party walls heated both sides effectively have zero heat loss. So that helps a bit. And you can, we have remade the cornices, moved them back in a bit. Still expensive, I grant you. But ideally, and even like 12 years ago, we were saying to retrofit the UK's stock, we need to be doing 13,000 homes a week.
Yeah.
And now it's gone up to something like 20,000 because we've done nothing in the meantime. So we can't, people can't be decanted from the homes. They have to stay in the homes. So we have to do external insulation. And we've done some retrofit for the future projects very successfully with external insulation. The problem is people say, oh, you can't do that on a Victorian building. And no one...
It makes it look different, doesn't it?
Well, it makes it look different, yeah. But now just imagine you're having this conversation with someone in 100 or 200 years' time. And they haven't got, they can't grow food because the climate is so erratic, the crops are all failing, everything, and they say, well, thank goodness at least you didn't insulate our Victorian properties. I mean, because we can still look at those and enjoy the brickwork. I mean, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? We've got to externally insulate the buildings. We need to get on with it. It's got to be our main focus of our lives.
But there needs to be some policy in place so people know where they are and what they can do and how they can do it.
Totally, because
nothing.
Totally, I totally agree. Because the problem is that people here would be doing this for themselves for however long they're going to be living in the home, and it's for them. They would be making, if they could afford it, they would be making a huge gift to future generations, and which some people would say is fine, but most people that's just too much. So what we need is, as I've been saying really for years, we just need to have a financial mechanism which I suggest vaguely, I'm not an economist, but something like pension funds backed up with a government bond somehow that provides enough of the money, either all or just enough to make it worthwhile, to the property to be retrofitted, and then there's a charge put on the property. So whoever's living in that property for the next 100 or 200 years is paying back a little bit, and it'll be far cheaper. The savings will be far greater than the expenditure. The other thing we need to remember is that alternatively, as people think just from our perspective now, looking forward, we think, oh, well, it's retrofit, or it's build new power stations. New power stations are only going to last 40 years, maybe. And the house is going to be there with good insulation, is going to be there for 200 years. People aren't spending £1 million on a house for it to fall down to 40 years' time. It's going to be there for generations, and that insulation will be as well. So again, think 200 years ahead.
I think there's another part of that as well, though, is that lots of people are doing extensions and build work to their houses because they want to increase the square footage, because that increases the value of your house, and then you sell it and move on. And that's fine, but maybe when you're doing that extension work, think about, while you're making a mess and ripping stuff down, do some retrofit work at the same time. So it's having an understanding over a longer term plan about what you're going to do, and maybe shifting some of your money expense around about whether it's kitchens or wall insulation at the same time. But it's kind of understanding what you're doing over a period of time. There's plenty of people, I'm sure, all around Guildford and everywhere right now where houses are being madly extended to quite a low quality, and they could be being extended and insulation improved at the same time.
But there's nothing in place, is there, to encourage people to do that? So they're just going to do it.
Well, there is now. It's called expensive energy bills.
Well, I suppose that's a good one.
But it certainly does need a national plan to help people do what people want to do. But just go and feel they can. I have so many people come and say, look, we've got £100,000 to spend. That ought to be plenty of money.
Justin, I'm going to try and get another question.
Okay,
that was a very good question. No, you don't have to say sorry. It was spot on, hammer on the nail question. Can I take another question from the audience? I'm going to take this as it depends what the answer's like, but we've got one there, and I'll see if I can fit you in, Andy. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Michael Cohen. I work in innovation at the University of Surrey, but I used to be an architect, actually, and I wanted to ask the question about, is it all about the architecture, things like Passive House, or is there something architects can do around people and how we design for changing the way we actually live? Quick example, when I was a young architect, I built a house for my mum. I was taught by Robert Brendavale, who taught us that you can design autonomous houses and they can be heated by your cat or your dog. So they were well into air source, I think, before air source heat pumps came along. But the thing is, my mum, she never turns the heating on. She lives at around 15 degrees C. She goes out in the garden. She always dresses up. And her heating bills consistently for 25 years have been under £350. So, I actually despaired when I was younger, because I thought, well, why are you not using the system we've designed, and you've spent all this money on your boiler? But actually, she just changed her architecture of how she lives. And that's her answer to the problem. So it's how do we design for people changing the way they live?
Well, I mean, there's a little bit of a tiny heat load that goes into a passive house that can be offset very easily by other things. But anyway, if you don't want to put anything in, then the house is never going to go down below anything that you would feel uncomfortable in a pullover. So I mean, yes, people. I would live like that myself in a passive house, certainly, especially now. What we're trying to do is to help people transition, because people are so used to. I lived in really, really cold houses when I was young, but people are used to central heating. They don't realise how much heat goes into their buildings through the gas, and there are very few people like your mother.
What tends to happen, I think, with social housing and council housing is that people get used to living at 17 degrees or 16 degrees, and the houses that have been retrofitted, they find all of a sudden, I can live at 21 degrees, it's much nicer. So the houses get retrofitted, and the energy use doesn't come down by as much as it should do, because people get used to having the houses warmer.
But we monitored an apartment on the Mayville estate next to the community centre, a couple of apartments, and one elderly lady went into hospital every year with pneumonia. And we were monitoring her temperatures. They were like 12 degrees, and then she could afford to put on a little bit of heat. You get this spike, and then she couldn't afford it anymore. The temperature would go down. Of course, as the temperature goes up, it takes on moisture, and as it goes down, it condenses. So walls were running with condensation and lung disease results. It's, we do need to do. We either don't have any heat at all, or, as we get older, we need a bit more. So I think we just have to try and create humane environments.
I'm going to take one more question from the gentleman in the middle there.
Hello, Andy Doherty, local resident, flirting with the idea of building a passive house. So a practical question. Whenever I've looked at the control units of these sort of houses, it looks a nightmare. Dials, valves, wires all over the place, and it looks like you need one engineer for heat pumps, a completely different expert for solar panels. So if it goes wrong, wouldn't know where to start. So could either of you, or especially if you've lived and built in such a house?
So the theory with the passive house is that it should be really simple. There should be a very simple heating system that's very small, so it doesn't need to be complicated. And because the house runs at a fairly constant temperature, you don't have to actively do anything to turn the heating on or off. It's just set and everything runs. I heard all sorts of stuff about how you should maybe turning the MVHR on boost when you have a shower and all this kind of thing, but the reality is it don't. It's just, it runs the same all year round. The heating's on the same all year round. It's just hardly ever on. That's it.
And dare I say, you don't need to worry so much about the maintenance. We had our first passive house social housing prototype in Ebbw Vale, 2010. The boiler, it was a gas boiler, and the gas boiler broke down, and the occupants said, "Don't worry." It was the middle of winter, it was Christmas, something. "Don't worry, we're fine. Deal with it after Christmas. We're perfectly comfortable." So, yeah, maintenance is not such a worry in a way, but controls can be really simple.
They do look complicated. But...
Well, they can be. I mean, we've done locks and controls and all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's just how much do you automate and how much do manual, and
there is a whole market for trying to sell things that are overcomplicated, but they're not actually required.
But some automation, just easy automation makes it easier for people to forget and not have to worry about anything. So I mean, lighting, for example, manual on, manual off, but automatic off if you forget. I mean, that's a simple little thing that saves a lot of energy and worth doing.
Okay, I'm going to call an end to the evening. Could I just ask for a short round of applause just to thank our speakers?